Rather, the second half of our day here at ThinkEdu Conclave 2025, India's premier education conference that places education at the heart of our country's transformation. We're truly dedicated to exploring how innovation, culture, how policy, all of these play into how we educate and empower future generations. This year, of course, we also turn our focus to the rise of the new Indosphere, and very much in line with that, we step into our upcoming session, First Time MPs, making their voices heard, bringing to spotlight those who are stepping into the world of politics armed with fresh ideas, bold energy, and a commitment to change. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to witness leaders who truly represent a new chapter in India's political narrative, breaking through the noise to make their voices count in the nation's powerful halls. With that, it is my pleasure to invite onto the stage our three dynamic MPs to share their stories, challenges, aspirations, and give us a glimpse into the future of Indian leadership. Please join me with a round of applause as I welcome Dr. Angomcha Bimol Akhoijam to join us, recently elected to the 18th Lok Sabha. Dr. Akhoijam continues to champion democratic values, social change, a renowned academic, filmmaker, political leader, a lot of experience we're going to hear on stage.
What is remarkable about this panel is we have members of parliament, some of them first-time members, but they are all successful professionals in their own right. And they are, for the young audience, I must say, that they are people who have come into politics despite being very prominent and successful in their professional lives. So politics is not entirely the bad world or a world that is better avoided. Let me start from that. For example, if I can call you Bimal, yeah. He's a well-known professor in Jawaharlal Nehru University, and he made his first debut speech at midnight in Parliament. And if there are some positives of having social media is that his speech went viral. As he spoke about Manipur and about its marginalization and the distance between Delhi and Manipur increasing, I would like Bimal to shed light on the topic. And did you actually expect the kind of response you got on your first speech, which not only went viral, everybody had to come down to cover it and took note of your speech and what you were trying to say?
First of all, thank you for inviting me to this program. There is a story behind that speech, and also whatever I've spoken has a lot to do with last 35 or 40 years of my academic life. The way I try to understand this country, what is this nation all about? That's why you can sense the thing I talk about. We talk about, say, for instance, continuity between the colonial and the post-colonial, and even the present government is trying to sort of do a decolonization process by changing criminal laws into, new kinds of laws as we're enacting. It's a well-known thing among many post-colonial scholars that many ideas and practices in this country are still those introduced by the British.
Could you hold it a little closer?
So, with that background and, students I have taught from Tamil Nadu, right now I have a PhD student from Tamil Nadu, incidentally, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, this cliche, then I have students across this country, and I've been trying to find with them what this country is all about. And the crisis in Manipur has again revealed much more clearly, which I have articulated some 25 years ago in my academic writing. The way in which we look at the Northeast, the way we handle this crisis itself is a reflection of that continuity. So I intended to express that in my first speech. despite the Manipur's presence in academic world, in medical field, in defense, my community, for instance, has the largest per capita officers in defense forces. We are the number one, followed by 6, the number of officers in defense forces as compared to your population.
You hold it closer.
What I'm saying is, despite all this presence, incidentally, one of my junior colleague is a professor of mathematics. He's leading the Indian for the mathematics Olympiad in Australia. He's also from my community. He's in ISI, Professor Shanta. So despite all this presence in sports and others, in cultural field and so on, the manner in which the government of India decided to keep silent, or even to some extent how the rest of the country looks at this crisis. I have raised this issue to journalists. I said, had this happened in Bihar or UP, would you have allowed this to happen? Then categorically the journalist says, it is on YouTube, you can check. They said no. So they said, somebody says it's a tyranny of distance. I said, it's not a tyranny of distance. This is not a case of out of sight, out of mind. It is rather a case of out of mind, out of sight. That's the case. So I intend to communicate on the floor of the House, and I was doing it systematically, and then I learned people started shouting me down. That's why last 1.5 minutes of my speech was full of emotion.
Which is very surprising, which was not there earlier. That is the change that has happened. First time MP's debut speech, the tradition was he or she was never interrupted and allowed to speak, given more time. That was norm.
I think, I have done as a student of social science how the parliament had changed its composition, its ethos have changed over the years. This is nothing new, but I have seen it from inside. What I have read in, PhD scholars' work and so on, I can see in practice now how. There was a time when people used to wait like a Friday opening of a movie. The parliament station, people waited to listen to Nehruji speaking, and how the debate goes on, and Westminster model and those things. And people have been writing since the last 20 years or so that that particular culture has shifted slowly. And I can see firsthand now that that culture is gone. And shouting, and sometimes you will be shocked, the kind of things that have been said. But I was mentally prepared for this. That's why, they are trying to distract my time, so I shouted back. So you can see change in the tonal aspect of my intervention towards the 1.5 minute of my speech at the end.
So rules of engagement has changed.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
You take it that
So
way.
it's a different era, different time
Yeah,
altogether.
absolutely.
But some of your speeches, not just your, some of your speeches of other MPs have also gone viral. So it's not as if that people don't listen to it. Listen when something clicks and some point is made forcefully enough and engaging enough, people do listen to it. And social media somewhere has kind of propped it up. Now let me come back to Bimal. You spoke about your debut speech being disrupted, but whatever happened, it went viral and you spoke at midnight and it became a remarkable, it became a story in itself. Tell me something, do you think Manipur has been effectively discussed in Parliament? And I don't want you to speak just as a INC MP. Okay, you speak as a Manipur MP and say how you would have preferred Manipur to be discussed in Parliament and what should have been done.
First of all, excuse me because I come from this tribe called academics, so I tend to quote things from thinkers and so on. There's this Danish philosopher, Søren Kierkegaard, once said, that you want to explain the general, then you look for an exception, a true exception, because the exception will explain the general as well as exception itself. So if you think that the way the 75 years, how this constitution has been operating, what is the nature of this country, what are the dynamics of exclusions that we have been experiencing over the last 75 years, I think Manipur is that exception. The constitutional order has been thrown into the dustbin. Okay, so you have a satrap, local satrap. This is almost like an empire where the Delhi decides everything. And so, the fact that many of us in the rest of the country will be looking at the way European journalists or the parliamentarians in Europe had looked at Rwandan crisis. There have been a lot of criticism against the manner in which the Western countries have responded to the Rwandan crisis and how is it different from the way they responded to the Yugoslavian crisis and so on. I can sense that generally the way we have responded to Manipur's crisis smacks of that one, and that is precisely what I'm saying, that is an example of the continuity of the colonial ethos from the post-colonial, from the colonial to the post-colonial. So the way, Article 355, is it in operation or not? Nobody knows. There is a chief minister who says that certain areas will be taken care of by the home minister, union home minister, and he's taken care of certain areas, which is unthinkable in this country. Ambedkar had once called the law and order as a domain, as he called it, the sovereign and plenary authority of the state. We have example of how certain articles have been amended because to curtail the influence of the union government on the state. We have histories of that. 257A, for instance, the capacity of the union government to send in troops was thrown away by the Supreme Court. But you are witnessing a classic case of the subversion of constitutional mechanisms. There is an extra constitutional exercise of power, and there is a willing satrap who is running the show in Manipur. It is like that Manchurian king, Puyi, the last emperor. The Japanese prop him up for sometimes he thinks himself as a king. And I think these are the aspects that when I want to talk, we don't want to talk about, and especially, it is my request to the rest of the country, don't talk about Manipur as a thing out there. It is a reflection of how this country is all about.
Bimal, if I can interrupt and tell you, I'll share something with you. We are largely seen as a southern paper, though we have an edition called Morning Standard, and it's called Sunday Standard in the weekend in Delhi, which is sort of doing well. We do have an edition there, but we are largely seen, and we do carry a fortnightly column by a Manipur journalist, Pradeep Panjabe,
I know.
regularly. And when the crisis happened, when it was at its peak, Patricia Mukim, she's quite well known, she wrote for us one or two columns, and you would be surprised to know when she just wrote, she had to run her own paper. When she had just written one or two pieces, and then she simply didn't get time, so we got so many letters saying, why aren't you getting her to write? We want to read and know what is happening. And this was letters coming to us and people calling up from, say, Trivandrum, Kochi, Bangalore, and all these places, Hyderabad, okay. Lot of interest about what is happening. So you have spoken about the silence around Manipur. Maybe inside you feel when crisis at that peak, but there was a response from the people, and people wanted to know. Okay.
No, I'm not denying that. In fact, I think I have written a piece for your paper as well on that women protest. I have done a piece. Those naked women being paraded. I think you asked me to contribute one, so I wrote one. I think I'm not talking about a couple of us writing in national paper. It's a general trend is what I'm talking at. I mean, excuse me for saying this, Indira Gandhi becoming prime minister doesn't necessarily mean that women folk in this country is doing well. I mean, it is in this sense that, incidentally, I have done, led a research team. We have investigated the manner in which within court, national media have responded to, and it is dismal. It is all against the Press Council of India's standard. It is, that work is available online. We are bringing it as a hard copy as well. We have covered, I don't want to mention the name of that big media houses, 5 within court national media we have analyzed the content on an everyday basis. All the news that cover Manipur, we have used theories of media studies and methods, scientific methods, and the finding is deeply, deeply disturbing. I have never seen Indian media responding to the crisis in Manipur like this. So that's one side of the story. The manner in which we have responded, when I said, it includes the manner in which the media have covered, almost fueling the crisis. I have said this, if I may take his name, Karan Thapar also, I said, you are fueling this crisis rather than dousing the flame. That's very unfortunate. It's a blot on the history of Indian media, if I would say that. But generally, I think, let's take it. This crisis has been going on for now 20 months. And who's in charge of this? Nobody knows. The Amit Shah is saying that the CM is cooperating.
Yeah.
And the CM says, my power has been taken over by the union government without declaring President's rule and so on. So I think it is, as we celebrate 75th year of this constitution, who is talking about complete subversion of the constitutional mechanism by the people who are ruling this country? I mean, nobody points finger.
Let's throw open the idea, because you are coming back to the same point, and media is always the easiest flogging pole. So I will just give a quick last word to all of you. How would you say, how do you make your voice heard in this era where social media has come to dominate everything? And is AI a threat to the politics that you do, the grassroots or the daily politics that we have seen till now? One quick word, two sentences each. We have to wrap up.
I think in the world of post-truth, I say the sanctity of parliament must be restored, because people should trust what is being deliberated on the floor of the House as something more reliable. I think in that sense, we all parliamentarians must be honest to the role that we play in our society. We should not be reduced ourselves to the hankering and unnecessary attempt to influence and manage perceptions, just as you do on social media. In this regard, I think we must also rethink. It's time for us to rethink what this country is going through. The nationalist ethos, the way we imagine India has been changing over the last decade or so. As part of that, I expect as a member, the marginals should speak for themselves, and everybody is trying to appropriate Ambedkar and so on. I think Dalits and they have to speak for themselves, just as I would speak for the marginal people in India's Northeast in particular. But when I speak about India's Northeast, you should not forget that I'm talking about this country. So I expect one way to begin, I'm looking forward to, is that all of us participate equally and do the needful.
I don't want to interrupt, but Bimal, this is also about a mindset issue. We have celebrated many of your great artists in Manipur, whether it is Aribam Sham Sharma, whether it's Ratan Thiam, whether it's Kanhai Lal, whether it is Savitri.
That's okay. It's like calling, less celebrating Sita and stuff like that doesn't necessarily mean you're doing good for the women.
No, I'm not trying to in any way discount the crisis that is going on, the kind of divide that your state is facing. We are trying to give coverage for it, but I would say that, the fact that there is a thing that, there is silence around Northeast. The process of a conversation, I think, is there, was there. There has been disruptions, but efforts have been on.
Just let me one sentence and I'll wind it up. I'm saying that, let's be honest, there is a need to reflect on what this country is all about, and that should begin with the way we deal with Manipur.
Right.